When we're working with our faculty members to have conversations about curriculum, instruction, assessment, or standards, you might be having these conversations in professional learning communities, PLCs, as the DeFores have shared with us in their seminal work on the topic. But you also might be doing it in grade level meetings or in department meetings or in students' needs focused groups or in curriculum mapping review groups. Whatever the nature of your initial conversation design, we want to encourage all of you to think about the types of data you're bringing to that conversation. In the field of education, at times, we have been pressured, whether we're in a culture of threat or we're under an accountability scrutiny type scenario, but we've been under a lot of pressure to use student achievement data. When we look at student achievement data or standardized test data, and we end up trying to make decisions about curriculum or make decisions about instruction based on that data. But the challenge to that is what do we really know about that data? What do we really know about that decision? Is it possible that we're having maybe a knee-jerk response to feedback and to that data that then results in what could be a catastrophically flawed decision? So what we want to do is think about what are the types of data that we should be considering. What do we call it? Where do we collect that data? What can we do to bring that data into our PLC or into our conversation so that we're making the best possible decisions? So we've broken that down into 6 major types of data that we try to consider. The first is student achievement data, but we want to acknowledge 2 types. The first type is standardized test data, either benchmark data, common assessment data. Whatever the form, it's data that is calibrated outside of the teacher's design. In-house assessment data would be any assessments or evidence pieces that come right from our unit plans. So when a teacher designs a unit plan and they have internal alignment where their essential questions are assessed and the skills are assessed, we can go in and actually pull samples of student work and we can check an item analysis and say, how did the students do on the standards when it was a part of our curriculum? And how did the students do on that standard or standards when it was part of a standardized test? So in that ability to compare and contrast the two, we can start making decisions about, was it how we asked about it? Was it maybe a critical part of the standard was missing from our in-house work? And we can make revisions either to our curriculum, to our assignments, or we can substantiate or refute the actual standardized test results. So that's 2 forms of just one type of data, student achievement data. The second type of data we encourage to bring to the conversation is curriculum data. So curriculum data might come if you have curriculum mapping as a part of your practice. You actually might have consensus maps or essential maps or master maps, whatever you want to call them, but they're maps that represent intended curriculum, what I intend to do. That's actually not the data so much as the operational curriculum data. So when a teacher gets a copy of a consensus map and makes changes and adjustments to reflect the decisions that they make in a given year with a given group of children, then that actually becomes curriculum data. So we could take that in-house data and that curriculum data and have a conversation that goes like this. How did the students do on what we actually taught? And then we could take that conversation and continue and say, how did what we actually teach compare to what we intended to teach? Well, I could have that conversation. It does become kind of silly when we think about having the conversation, how did the students do on what we intended to teach? That critical piece of curriculum data is so important. So that's a second type of data. A third type of data that we would consider to bring to the conversation would be environmental data. What actually happened in our environment? Snow days here in the Northeast, earthquake days, hurricane days. Has anyone ever worked in a building that was currently under construction? In these kinds of circumstances, we might have impacts on our actual curriculum delivery based on factors that are outside of our control. I'm thinking of one school that had a tremendous number of fire drills in 1 month. That can impact the curriculum delivery, but it doesn't mean the knee-jerk response to a lower student performance would be to make a better curriculum or better instructional delivery. Sometimes it's how do we reduce the number of fire drills. We want to be able to have that kind of data to inform our decision. The fourth kind of data that we want to think about here is student data. Who are our students? What are they experiencing? This might be things like attendance records. If the child is not in the building, then the response to improving achievement isn't make a better curriculum or get better teachers. The response is, let's find a way to get better attendance rates. Another factor, socioeconomic status, number of parents on active military assignment. These are the kinds of things that absolutely impact student achievement, but they're not the kinds of things that we might have when we're looking at the standardized test scores to help us understand the dynamics of what is going on. A fifth kind of data we want to consider bringing to the table is perception data. So survey your students. What do they think of the curriculum? We could have a beautifully aligned curriculum and one that's taught with passion and joy. But if the student does not perceive a personal connection, a meaningfulness to what we're doing, then they might pass a test. They might get the minimum, but they're not going to hit the potential that we could have hit if we could have tapped into something they personally connected to. But don't stop there. Survey your faculty. Have you ever seen your faculty when they are passionate about what they teach? What do they think about the curriculum? Is it the kind of thing where they actually have costumes that match what they're teaching? Okay, guess what? That unit's probably working. But have you ever seen faculty when they're not personally connected? And they might come in, they've had multiple cups of coffee, they dress down because they need the comfort, and they might say something in front of the class like, okay kids, let's just get through this. Well, already now the learners have disengaged from the material, the faculty is disengaged from the material. That kind of data, if we could talk about that, it might be an opportunity for us to do a solution like, well, maybe during that unit, I have another teacher who actually wrote the book about that material come in and be a guest speaker during that time. Maybe we switch classrooms. This kind of solution only happens when we actually have that data on the table to help us get those creative solutions. And the last kind of data we just want us to play with here is research data. What's out there? What's working with other populations? What's working with students like ours? Is there something out there that's been tested, tried? Maybe if it's not tested and tried, is there something we should be doing action research on? If there's a gap in the research, let's fill it. If there's material out there, let's examine it. As a faculty, I'm not saying we just have to do what research says, but it's the kind of thing where we could go in and we could decide either we are going to follow that research or here's why we're not going to, and let's make sure we feel confident in our decision. These 6 types of data, student achievement data, 2 forms, standardized and in-house, curriculum data, student data, perception data, environmental data, and research data. I'm not saying you're going to get all 6 all the time, but a commitment as a faculty to not changing anything about curriculum, instruction, or assessment without at least 2 types of data in the conversation is a great place to start.